So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go over some of the early submissions that I have and sort of talk through some of the good and bad-ish things that we are doing in our tile sets. So as you know, each box is broken up into sections. So this person, you'll notice you can't necessarily see who they are, and that's intentional. But this is box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so let's talk about some of the great concepts here. They're staying within their limited 11 color palette. However, one thing that I'm concerned about with this one is box 5. See how box 5 has these really obvious like sections where you can see like that circle or that hole in the tapestry? The artistry here is fantastic, but the problem is that box is going to be repeated over and over and over and over, which means you're going to have the same hole repeated over and over and over. So you've got to be really careful about box 5, 6, and 7. Not only do they have to be kind of plain, so they're not going to show up and be jarring to see them a ton, but they also can't have any gradient. So for instance, if we look at this box here, see how the top line and the bottom line aren't the same color? When we start stacking this box on top of itself, we're not only going to have this circle problem that also sort of comes into this little bottom section, but the fact is this section is going to be really oddly, it'll be jarring when you stack this part, which is darker, on this part here. So let me just sort of show you that in a nutshell. I'm going to take this section here. So when you see a wall of this, it's just going to look very jarring because it's going to look like these patterns of lines of holes. So that's what I'm concerned about when I talk about making sure that layer 5's got to be kind of lame. It's just the way it is. Like if you have bricks, like a brick wall, that's fine because bricks are detailed, but they're repetitive, and that's okay. But other things like this and this and this, that just doesn't work. Okay, let's look at some other examples. All right, this is a 32-bit, 32 pixel by 32 pixel, so we're going with more detail, which is fine. We still have the same box cycles. We have this box cycle. It just consists of 4 boxes of 16 pixels. In general, this is pretty good because box 1 will tile into box 16. However, if we look at this box here, box 4, it's not going to tile into anything on the second half. You're going to have to take box 16 and somehow cut it in half, and we can't do that. That's not how tile sets work. So if you have a gradual edge or a gradual ramp that goes down this far, you need to start on the next box at this pixel, which I think is like 8 pixels down in this case, and you've got to continue that ramp through here. Okay, so for instance, if once again, I'm going to grab this section, duplicate. Oh yeah, layer of your copy. Okay, Control T. I've got to take that and move it here. But it's not just enough to move it here. I need to make sure it's going to align. So I've got to move it up or down actually by like this far, which means now you need like a whole separate box just for this because you're going to need another box that controls that entire section. So with the wide section of mushroom top, you're going to need it to be able to mirror into itself. Also, if you look over here, this edge here will need to be mirrored every time you use it because this mushroom circle is going to need to be mirrored. So every time you use this box, you're going to have to use another box on its own. And it's got other issues with this tiny, tiny little problem up here. The fact that this spot goes across the line of the first box into box 2 means that this will never be able to tile perfectly unless you tile the whole process. And that's not what we want. We want to be able to avoid that. Okay, so be very careful about making sure your art, all of the details within your art fits within the box itself. Otherwise, you're going to have weird problems. also kind of like this. There's some weird, like all the other spots are nice and big, but then we've got like a weird 1 pixel spot and like a weird half pixel spot here. So be careful with little details like that. Okay, this is another sort of situation. So this person has decided to do 3 pixels from the top for their ground, which is fine. But up over here, they only have 2 pixels from the from the ground. That's going to give you a problem when it comes to your jump height, because now you've got a 1 pixel difference, which doesn't make that much of a difference until we look down here and we've got like 6 pixels. So the inconsistency of where your floor is in relation to each box is a problem. So you really need to start thinking about like, how am I going to use this in my game? This ramp right here will not be able to tile because it's only 1 pixel from the top. It won't be able to tile into this because this ramp will end up ending all the way up here, but you've got your floor tile here. This box here, box 8, is conceptually a repeat of box 5, which makes sense because you don't want things to be super repetitive. However, this is already pretty lame, which is what we want, so that's okay. The problem here is there's no tan spots, only brown spots. So therefore, this is going to stick out worse than that. If there's some sort of gameplay element here, then that makes sense, so that's fine. But we have the same problem here as we do here. This will also not actually tile into anything. So box 16 won't link up with anything because it ends, it looks like around a height of 9, and nothing else ends at a height of 9. So this one will not finish. This part is okay. This part is okay. These sections are fine. You just have to be consistent about how tall your walkable height is. Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, this one's actually pretty good because we've got each box. This is another 32 pixel by 32 pixel section. You'll notice that this section here tiles down, and it will tile into this section when you need it to go into a gray box 5. There's also a simple box 5 that takes the place of this that's functional. That's good. But the other problem is this. The only problem actually that I see here is this height. So this height is at 16, 20 pixels off of the bottom of the box, whereas this one is 16 pixels off the bottom of the box. This ends at 16 pixels, which is great because it will relatively tile into this kind of. This top portion should probably be the same width, which looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a darker shaded. This has 1, 2, 3, and then a darker shade. So therefore, this whole white edge probably needs to be 1 pixel wider so that it will line up and connect into this section a little better. I'm also concerned about box 7 because this sort of little panel, while cool, is going to be really obvious because when we start stacking it on top of each other, that little red heat panel or whatever it is going to be repeated over and over and over and over, and it's just going to start looking weird. So it'd probably be good to maybe simplify this a little bit so it's a little less obvious when we repeat it over and over. Let's look at another one. Okay, this one's a pretty good one too. We've got a consistent walkable height, so that's good. We've got a relatively consistent walkable height even on the floating platform. I mean, there's little bumps and stuff, which is okay. We will sort of ignore those when it comes to like the collision. But we've got, let's see, I think it's 2 pixels here and 2 pixels here, but this is really more of a 3 pixel height difference, and this is more of a 2 pixel height difference. So what I would do is I'd make it consistent one way or the other. And then when we look at this section here, once again, this is a very, very stark ramp because it's even more drastic than a 45-degree angle. Actually, maybe it is 45 degrees, but still, the fact that it stops at 2 above means it only will link into this, and it won't link appropriately because this has a bottom, and this is intended to tile. This section here is the same problem we had with the mushroom. There's nothing to continue the gradual ramp, okay? Also, this section here, I believe, is a debatable use of another top repeating, except this has a little bit of like a hole thing. And this, I assume, is this. Again, I don't know. This doesn't really have much of a function. Let's see what else we got. How about this one? Let's look at this one. All right, this one is actually really excellent because almost all of it will tile together. This pixel height is, we're looking at 32 wide, or I'm sorry, each box is 32 by 32, so we're at 128 instead of our 64. If we look at the floor heights, they're all the same roughly. This section here will tile into this section, which is good. The floor color has the same sort of gradient where it's like this like light to medium to dark brown. The dark brown sort of transitions to the medium, so this will be used over and over. It's interesting, but not so interesting. It'll be crazy repetitive. It might be a little repetitive, but I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. You can see where this person took this image and copied it here. That's not terrible. It stays consistent, so that's okay. You can also see where this piece has been copied and pasted there. It's okay. This is definitely going to round out the bottom, and this will also this will tile into this piece, and this will tile into this piece. And of course, we can mirror it back and forth. All in all, I think that this one works pretty well. The only thing I'm concerned about is the color from here to the bottom here. I'm not sure if it's off or not. It looks close enough for me, that's for sure. So this is actually pretty much exactly what we want. This is probably the best version that I have to show you guys. I would say that this one black pixel that was copied 4 times is a little problematic because it's just very obvious. Very obvious in quotes, but something to think about. Okay, let me see if we got any more we can look through. Close that one. We talked about that one. Here's a good one. Okay, if this section and this section, this is supposed to be the middle, right? And this is supposed to be the middle, and this is supposed to be the bottom. Well, there's no real difference between this and this, besides some subtle coloration differences. And that's okay, but I feel like this could have been turned into like the bottom of the boat or something a little more like drastic, something that you could use a little more effectively. This middle pole section is good. I'm concerned about this little blue S shape because once you start repeating this over and over, it's going to be a little more obvious. It's not noticeable now, but when it's repeating, it becomes obvious quickly. The flag at the top is super cool. I love that. I think the biggest issue I have right now is this staircase and this staircase are the same, just flipped, which we can flip it in the engine. So therefore, you never need to do a 2 sides of one thing. I don't really see any difference other than that. So I'm not quite sure if there's a functional difference I'm just not seeing or not. Maybe there is, I'm not sure. But if you're concerned about having a section you can see through and a section in the background, we can do that in the engine. So you only need one piece. So realistically, I feel like this could have been changed, this one could have been changed, and one of these could have been done differently. So that's good. Talked about that one. Talked about that one. Talked about that. I think we talked about this one. I forget if I mentioned the skull. I don't understand what that's for. It doesn't match everything else. And as I mentioned in my own mistakes, the skull that I made for my super quick version of my dodgeball game was a bad idea. I would not use something so blatantly obvious because this is something you will do through a different system. If you want a skull like an enemy or something like that in your game, you want to do that separately. So you don't want it in your tile set. We talked about this one. Oh, here's a good one. All right, notice this section here is good. This is going to be repetitive, but we have a problem as in this line here has this pink on the opposite side. So therefore, it will never, or it will always have to line up with this section, and you can't flip it. Try and make sure your art, like this section, the art stays the same. Now, if you've got a building like this that repeats, that's fine. You're going to have these like purple, green, purple, green, purple, green. That's fine. That'll work out just fine. Over here, and I know it's sort of on the cloud layer, which is pretty cool, and there's some top parts of the cloud. I'm assuming that these top parts of the cloud line up well. It looks like they do. The chain, however, this part of the chain tiles amongst itself. So you can see that from here, you've got two links that go to a square, two links to a square, two links to a square, and then the square here sort of crosses over, right? This part, this crossing over, isn't necessary because the rest of the chain doesn't need it. So I feel like this piece and this piece, though they are different by 2 pixels, aren't really necessary. So you can definitely redo or use that. Be careful with these sections where anything like a window that crosses over needs to make sure that it crosses over well on itself, which in this case it does. Just one of those things you got to be careful of. Like the pink shadow under here is a pseudo issue. So I think maybe the idea is that this chain will link into this, which will give you this girder. And I noticed how this is the edge and this is the center, but that's okay. That doesn't matter. That's fine. This section where it crosses over, like if we look closely, this bottom tile crosses over into the tile above it. That's going to be a real big problem because that means this will always have these 2 little green spots in it. So that will not work. However, if you take all of this section and drag it down, it would be better. However, a better process in general would just be to make these little decorative cacti their own box. Because you've got the top layer of this dirt lining up, but then it's all lined up at the very top. But this doesn't. It's like halfway up. The concern here is that when it's halfway, you're looking at different jump heights again. Other than that, the art style is cool. I feel like these are gems or something. I don't know, but they're cool. This will never tile well because it only can be an edge. And it won't tile to anything else. Like this edge being down in the bottom, 5 or 6 pixels of this this corner will be problematic because you can never actually attach it to anything and have it look good. This twisty piece is okay as long as this middle section will not tile correctly because you're only 2 pixels away from the edge at the bottom. And you're 3 at the top, which is okay, but you're 3 over here, and then you're 1. So like it's going to be a really jarring like shift every time you need this thing to go further and further up. All right. Okay. This situation is pretty good actually. You've got your top section is always on the first pixel at the top. That's fine. I don't quite understand the like theme here because if this it looks like water. The water is also at the top, but it's frozen. I don't know, maybe the character will have some sort of water freezing ability. That could work. This is a dark blue tile that would go underneath here or underneath here, but it would only go underneath those 2 sections. It would not link or work properly anywhere else. So that's a little weird. Here's the biggest thing though. This tile here doesn't seem to have any function besides being the same as this tile, except it takes up the entire 16 square. This only fills the bottom roll of this same tile. So I'm not quite sure what this tile 4 and tile 8 are functional, like how they're going to be used. In this situation, we have the same problem as before. We have a half ramp that doesn't have anything that it connects to, and this tile here is floating, which means you'll never be able to tile it against tile 5. It needs to go all the way to the bottom and sort of seamlessly link into tile 5. Otherwise, it's just not going to work well. Or seamlessly link into this tile 1. But in this case, it's actually floating by a pixel. So that's an easy fix to just drag it down, but it's a little weird. But this half tile, that doesn't work, and this tile is totally empty. So once again, there's some issues on this one. And finally, this one is pretty perfect. It's got 1 pixel from the top all the way through, 1 pixel on the top through here. This section will tile perfectly with this section. Um, the the individual tiles by itself. This ends a little earlier than this section, so I'd be slightly concerned about that, but it's not a deal breaker. This and this are repeats so that you can mix and match your tiles, so that's good. And this are repeats with slight variations. My concern is this section and this section, the black line's identical. The top part's a little bit different, but that's okay. I might make something a little less descript so that you can keep it pretty boring, and then maybe put a few of these dripping water sections occasionally. This is an interesting aspect. You've got this tile that's a 45-degree angle that will obviously tile because it's got one space difference, so it will obviously tile to here, so that's fantastic. It's got it's one from the top, black, 2 whites, black, brown. One from the top, black, 2 whites, black, brown, black. So it will perfectly tile to this. And this whole function for this tile 16 is just so you can take this and tile it into box 1, which is exactly, unfortunately, what we have to do. It is what it is. But yeah, this is pretty great. This is 100 points for sure. All right. So I hope that helps. That's a lot of extra detail. I know we've gone over it in the room a bunch. We've talked about the tile sets and we've drawn it on the board, and I've explained it multiple times. But now hopefully you can watch this video over and over until you sort of understand if your tile set is having trouble. Okay, thanks. See you. Bye.